Welcome to the Intifada Globalists, a podcast against international Zionism. I'm Anonsus.
And I'm Doug.
Something that we were really thinking of focusing on to start with is the Israeli connection to the mass migration crisis, which really starts with the Libyan civil war and the overthrow of Gaddafi. So Doug had sent a couple of great articles and actually an interview with a very famous guy. Some people might call him a hero, not people that I would like to associate with. Most of us would probably more associate him with the devil, perhaps some other type of evil entity of choice, depending on your religious affiliation. Benjamin Netanyahu. So we can kind of get into this interview a bit. I guess to start off, it's interesting. So this interview, is it from 2011, right?
Yep. During the Libyan crisis before the NATO intervention.
Yes. And it's with Piers Morgan. And in the transcript, one of the main takeaways from it that I think is really important is Netanyahu's sort of full-throated endorsement for NATO intervention, which I shouldn't necessarily say full-throated. He supports it, but he goes about it in kind of an interesting way, right?
Yeah, he talks about Gaddafi, very bad man, even very bad towards the Libyan people who we, the Jews, love. And would I bring in a no-fly zone? I wouldn't second guess if Obama decided that this is in the interests of the Libyans. This is a place where our Western interests, like me, noted Westerner Benjamin Netanyahu, align with our values of freedom and democracy and whatever.
Yes, that's kind of a theme that he hits on repeatedly in the interview. Is he says that, broadly speaking, he's in favor of all the sort of upheaval that was going on in the Middle East at the time, but he does note that while he, of course, supports democracy rising in all these countries because it would make these countries more like Israel, which he considers to be this wonderful, shining beacon of Western liberal democratic values in a sea of backwardsness. He actually says something along the lines of the Arab world missed the 20th century. And they're sort of playing catch up to the political developments that the Israelis, of course, embraced wholeheartedly. But he says that there's a downside, which is that, all these democratic revolutions could also potentially bring Iranian-style anti-Semitic governments to the Middle East that would stand opposed to Israel. And of course, as he has done, I think since the 90s, he fearmongers about how Iran is rapidly going to be able to develop a nuclear weapon and cause terror. But I think
if it's rapid, then it must have happened since 2011, right?
Yeah, surely.
Rapid in this article's from 2011.
Yeah, surely at some point, Iran must have developed those nukes. But I think, as we both know, the Israeli constant fear-mongering about Iran developing nuclear weapons and then launching them at Israel is strange. I mean, it's bizarre. It's not really founded in reality. I mean, I've said this before, I think, and this is a bit of a sidetrack, but in a lot of ways, Israel is what we are told Iran is, as this this fundamentalist, religious ethno-state that is founded in violence and bloodshed and interferes with Western politics. All of this is much more true of Israel than it is of Iran. And also, unlike Iran, we know Israel has nuclear weapons. They have a lot of nuclear weapons. They have not signed on to any nuclear treaties like all the other nuclear powers. They are probably, I guess them and North Korea would be the two genuine rogue nuclear states out there nowadays. And I would personally be much more suspicious of Iran than North Korea because, to give a little credit to the Democratic People's Republic over there, they haven't really started a conflict since the 50s. I can't say the same about Israel. They seem to always be finding ways to jump into wars. But anyhow, I guess one of the more interesting points in the about the interview is you see pretty early on, and I had never read this before now, the way that Israel kind of Netanyahu sort of lays out how Israel embraces instability in the Middle East to achieve their political ends. And I guess one of the main topics we were talking about discussing today was how that resulting instability is one of the main drivers of mass migration to Europe, which a lot of people on the right seem to think is an unrelated, unconnected phenomenon to Israel and the Zionist project, and that you can oppose one without also explicitly opposing the other. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, it's the Zionist project itself is a project of mass migration. You know, we talk about a great replacement. We're looking at the ideas which the right bring up in regards to immigration in Europe. I mean, a great replacement has occurred and is continuing to occur in the Levant. That is the core of the public ideology of Zionism.
Yes, and part of that ideology hinges on the fact that when they expand, not just their population, but when Israel expands its territory, as it's done several times now, um, they have to send those people somewhere when they don't just kill them, and a lot of those people get sent to Europe. And as well, a lot of countries that are opposed to Israel, for example, as we mentioned, Libya or Syria, when these countries face instability, Israel is almost always backing the insurgent against the state. And they're almost always sort of fueling, sometimes directly with finances and military assistance, competing factions that end up driving more Arab refugees out of the Middle East and to Europe. Another article that we were looking at, and well, actually, I guess to move back to Libya real quick, the deals that the Italian government twice tried to create with different governments in Libya to prevent migrants fleeing Libya entering Europe.
Yes, yes. Originally, they had one with the Libyan government of Gaddafi, the one Netanyahu was so keen to overthrow in 2011. There was a European Libyan agreement for African migrants to be kept and to be resettled in Africa. Funny idea that. But this deal goes away when the Libyan government, which made it, goes away. So we have a period in the mid 2010s of uh, unprecedented for a few thousand years levels of mass migration from outside of Europe into Europe uh, through, first of all, the Mediterranean Sea. And after several years of this, pretty much anyone who got into right wing politics in the 2010s, uh, this, or even like anti right wing politics, the politics they were talking about was related to this migration crisis. And so we get in the latter parts of the mid 2010s, we get a second agreement with the Tripoli based new Libyan government. There are two competing ones, and their Coast Guard to rescue African migrants in the Mediterranean, take them to Libya. Now, this agreement does face some opposition in the form of a lawsuit by the Global Legal Action Network, a UK based charity, um, but one whose Britishness is a bit of a funny issue. Its largest donor is Soros's Open Societies Foundation, and it's heavily staffed by Israelis. Um, in particular, their chief legal advisor is Itamar Mon. He's a law professor at the University of Haifa. Suing on human rights grounds in the European Court of Human Rights. Glan is, or Glan, I'm Israelifying the name, but so we'll probably stick with that. They sue on human rights grounds to oppose this effort, so that migrant boats will not be intercepted in the Mediterranean and brought to Libya, but will rather be allowed to either sink or perhaps reach Italy. Somewhat less likely, but that is one possible outcome there, reaching Italy.
Well, I mean, as I'm sure you and I would agree, human rights typically include drowning at sea. That tends to be a great move for human rights. That tends to be the type of thing that you would think a quote unquote liberal think tank or whatever, like the Open Society, would support. Right? Is Africans and Arabs drowning in the ocean? Um, but actually, more seriously, it to me really illustrates the fact that it's a lot of these so-called human rights NGOs that are linked to Israel or linked to Israeli Jewish donors, funders, lawyers, etc. Um, human rights are not factored into the equation at all. The reality is, in order to weaken their potential rivals in the region, they will support things that are pretty awful. And, if a consequence of that is mass Arab and African migration into Europe, Israel certainly doesn't seem to be upset about that. So it's kind of a win-win situation for them, lose-lose for Europe, for the fleeing refugees, and for anybody who thinks that drowning at sea sounds like a miserable way to go. But, of course, in the eyes of the Israeli government and their international Zionist support base, these are all trivial concerns compared to bolstering their ability to bully and dominate their rivals as a nuclear hegemon and as a sort of violent expansionist regime in the Middle East, right? But
Yep.
it's interesting because kind of connecting to that, right? So what you have there really is you have multiple times the Italian government desperately trying to conduct deals to slow the tide of refugees. And the first time the government they have that deal with is overthrown with Israeli backing. The second time, you've got Israelis making a human rights argument to shut that deal down. And then another article that we read was about the Israeli role in funding in the Golan Heights anti-Assad rebel groups.
Yep, yeah, funds, supplies, medical supplies, and fuel, which is, fuel isn't really a civilian item per se. It's clearly dual use, and the cash as well. So, trying to frame this as a purely humanitarian effort is a bit dubious, especially because Israel is selective with which combatants it was aiding at this time. It was going for the anti-Iranian Sunni rebels. Like this was an anti-Hezbollah effort, uh, not a broad humanitarian effort.
And it was interesting that it was saying that they were mainly giving the group. So it was cash, fuel, and if you're familiar at all with conflicts in the Middle East, whether they've involved Libya, Syria, there's a lot of vehicle based, technical based, which is, if you don't know, technicals, this is just an aside, this is my own autism kicking in. Technicals are trucks that people mount weapons on the back of, and in the Middle East, they get very creative with what those weapons are. There are truly some fascinating technicals out there if you care to look. But, more directly relevant, I guess, is they were supplying these rebels with fuel and with not just medical supplies, but medical assistance. That one of the things the article mentioned was that when some of these fighters were injured, they actually went to the Israeli border and asked for medical assistance from Israeli military forces, and then put out a statement. Their spokesperson put out a statement saying, quote, Israel stood by our side in a heroic way. We wouldn't have survived without Israel's assistance. And
Needless to say, if you're from Gaza or the West Bank, you can't simply approach Israeli forces and ask for medical treatment.
oh no, if you're from Gaza or the West Bank and you ask the Israeli soldiers for medical treatment, they might give you an injection of 556 in the head. They don't tend to be very kind to those Arabs. But when you're fighting against a government that they are opposed to, like Bashar al-Assad's government, which, as you mentioned, was backed by Hezbollah, was backed by Russia, was, I think you and I would agree, a overall a force for stability in the country of Syria.
Yeah, compare
Um,
it to the alternative we've seen since last December.
exactly, which is of course sectarian violence. Uh, the Bashar al-Assad government was fundamentally a fairly secular government. It was
Hmm.
trying to keep the peace because Syria is a rather diverse country. And as somebody from a rather diverse country, I can tell you that there are pros and there are a lot of cons. And one of those cons, when you're dealing with the kind of situation that Assad was, is there's a lot of opportunity for these different rebel groups, either along ethnic or religious lines, to rise up, cause terror. This is obviously where ISIS really kicks into gear. The Kurdish resistance, all these different disparate groups. But it's very notable that Israel was picking sides in that conflict yet again, just like they were in Libya. And ultimately, the group that they were backing the strongest, the group mentioned in that article, they were really backing because they wanted to set up a buffer zone, right? I guess, and you could probably explain this better than me, but I guess now, cutting ahead to 2025, there isn't really as much of a need for an ally to set up a buffer zone in that region because Israel has just militarily occupied parts of Syria.
Yes, and I mean, they have since 67, so Israel already has a buffer zone in Syria, and it's had one since June of 1967. That's the Jalan Heights. And Israel is doing the thing where you claim the need for a buffer zone for your buffer zone, and has been salami slicing its way through Syria over the years under this method.
Exactly, because what ends up happening inevitably with every Israeli buffer zone is the Israelis don't feel very safe in their buffer zone, despite that being the only reason that you ostensibly create one. And so, yeah, then they go, well, we just need a couple more miles, we just need a couple more feet, we just need to extend it out a little further, and then we'll finally feel safe. But of course, Israelis almost never seem to feel safe. Uh, I'm convinced that they could own the entirety of the Middle East. They could create a state that dwarfed even like the greatest caliphates in history, and they would still feel like they didn't have enough territory to defend themselves. They would still feel the need to justify creating buffer zones and buffer zones and buffer zones because it's just an expansionist project, and they
Yes.
haven't. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just completely agreeing. Yes. Israel will claim a buffer zone, then claim that that's an integral part of Israel and the Bible and whatever, then claim a buffer zone for that old buffer zone. And I mean, this is, of course, being done cynically. There's a Greater Israel Project, which has kind of insane territorial claims, from uh, from the Nile River to Baghdad, which is that's not a territorial extent to Israel, which could occur, but it's one which they seem to be trying.
Well, and I think that's a key detail is too often when the topic of Israel comes up, and I'm speaking mostly in right wing spaces, right? You have people that think that you can treat Israel like a rational actor. They even if they claim to be opposed to Israel, they actually buy a lot of Israeli messaging on its face. And so they're told that Israel is this force of stability, that it's an American ally, that it is Western, and that it is surrounded by unstable, expansionist. regimes. The reality is almost the exact opposite. I mean, every single regime that the Israelis have criticized, from Gaddafi to Assad to Iran, um, a lot of the violence is instituted or is started by Israel. Like, how many times did Israel bomb Syria and Syria didn't respond? Right? It's an incredibly one-sided exchange of violence, and the violence is almost always originating in Israel. And so, when people talk about this, they'll say, and I think this loops back a bit to the immigration thing. They'll say somewhat cynically, "Well, listen, I don't support Israel, but it's in America's best interest that we have an ally in the Middle East. And Israel is the closest thing to America, or the closest thing to a European country, or some other bizarre excuse." And it's just not true, right? There are no Western countries that are that engage in similar conduct as Israel. The United States certainly doesn't, and when the United States tries to, like I think we're seeing right now with Venezuela to some extent, it proves to be immensely unpopular. Like, the American public does not get on board with it. The Israeli public, however, I suppose, is uniquely uh, predisposed to engage in sort of warmongering behavior, because they absolutely, despite all the talk of being, victims that are surrounded on all sides by enemies that need buffer zones and Western aid and NATO aircraft carriers off their border to protect them from missiles, uh, they're the power in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. They're the power that is expanding. They're the power that routinely bombs their neighbors and faces no consequences. Nobody else, nobody else is in this sort of lovely luxury position that they are. You know?
Yeah, as far as behavior goes, I mean, I really think the analogy one has to use is ISIS. Uh, it's not a regular bounded state per se. It's also not a citizen state. It's just sort of like the Israeli self conception is that they are the particular area which a global Jewish entity happens to hold at the present moment. For example, like they don't claim any borders per se. That's very unusual for a state. Like you can't get a straight answer out of Israel as to what its borders are. Uh, I think that really tells you something kind of entity we're dealing with here.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, the Israelis reject kind of state one, like, I don't even know what you would describe this as, like government policy 101. I own a certain part of the planet. That is what my government owns. These are my borders. Uh and yeah, they don't seem to follow the same conception. And what's interesting is a lot of this territory that they claim, when you really trace it back, they're not saying, there is this oppressed Jewish minority in Syria that we're trying to liberate, right? They're not saying, we our people. It's all founded on. I mean, let's be honest here. Biblical texts, basically, like their conception of where their nation should end is, and not even exactly that. It's like an approximation of the greatest territorial extent that the Bible could imply, plus also other regions that they kind of want to have in this extremely vague, uh, nonsense based. It's very odd. It's very strange. It's very unusual. I don't think it can be said enough that Israel is a genuinely unique state in the world. The way Israel acts, the way Israel does things, the free passes that Israel gets, no other country gets the same treatment. No other country even conceives of itself in the same way that Israel does. You know?
Yeah, and the fact they play an interesting game when it comes to rhetoric of their uh, their foreign partisans. So the fact that it is such a unique state does mean that it will, for example, be more often a topic of the United Nations General Assembly, or will be treated differently sometimes in a negative way, usually in a positive way, than all other states by other states. So, and this is classically attributed to this trans-historical, quasi-supernatural force of anti-Semitism infecting the countries which, treat them differently. Um, this does present some problems in that countries which just straight up don't have a history of Jews or of anti-Semitism being common in them also are also forced to treat Israel differently. Like, is the long history of anti-Semitism in Thailand the reason why it votes against Israel on the frequent UN General Assembly resolutions which deal with the international community's policy towards Israel?
Well, and even right, it's fascinating that Israeli nationalism is founded in, for example, I mentioned it earlier, right? Venezuela. Venezuela is one of these countries that they consider kind of an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic state.
Mhm.
The Venezuelan people, they are not the Polish people. They are not the Russian people, right? There's no long track record of deep Jewish involvement in the Venezuelan community that they can say inspires this, like, yeah, supernatural curse that they have to deal with, anti-Semitism, that means that magically countries notice when they murder civilians and get mad at it, which is of course a travesty, right? No other country in human history has ever been criticized for killing unarmed combatants. Only Israel in the minds of the Israeli nationalists. And
Yeah, and that's
so,
what's so. I was just that's what's so interesting. It's like the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. There are a few other lists you can point to of like lists of anti-Semitic tropes, and a lot of them boil down to um, treating uh, other people's negative behavior towards Israel or other Jewish institutions as having historical causes, like historicizing conflict between some Jewish group or institution and some Gentile group or institution is a form of anti Semitism. You just have to treat it as some sort of like magical force outside of history, which comes in and infects people. You keep hearing the mind virus framing as being the cause of anti Israel views.
now this is interesting. So I'm looking at this list right now, actually. And so, first of all, one of the IHRA things is denying the Jewish people their right to self determination, e.g., by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor.
So
Um,
saying the Nakba was racist is an anti Semitic trope.
Oh, this is a really interesting one right here. Applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. Now that's interesting because the behavior that people are typically criticizing Israel for is stuff like bombing civilians, shooting unarmed people, killing children, um,
Yeah, this is
starving
just
a population.
yeah, the way this point of the definition works is just it's demanding you do whataboutism against yourself. Like you have to condemn every other bad thing in the world to the satisfaction of the pro-Israel partisan you're dealing with before he'll let you criticize Israel without him calling you anti-Semitic.
Exactly, exactly, and this is why, you know, that's I really like the way you put that because it's true. And this is why so often tepid criticism of Israel that you often get from mainstream liberal parties or like certain mainstream conservatives, it it never works because they'll always go, well, first of all, I want to say Israel has a right to defend itself. And Israel has, the Jewish people in Israel have been the victims of uh, all of evil throughout all of human history, and also every other country on earth would do the same or worse than Israel if they were in Israel's shoes. So we can't fault them too much. But please, despite all of what I just said, could you just tone down the killing a little bit? Right? This is so
Yep.
often the way that people frame things, and And Israeli partisans or partisan political actors are really, really good at using this because what they'll do is if you're arguing with a Zionist, they will inevitably try to devolve the discussion into making you condemn. For example, if you bring up criticism of how Israel treats the people of Gaza, they'll say, well, wait a minute. What do you think about the situation in South Sudan? And I'll say, I think it's horrible. I always think it's a tragedy when people are killed. I don't like killing. It's a bad thing. I mean, this is common sense stuff, right? Murder was wrong. There's a reason pretty much everybody in all human history has agreed that murder is wrong. But then they'll just go through a list. They'll say, oh, well, what about Russia, Ukraine? What about what's the thing right now with Cambodia and Thailand, I think?
Yeah.
Just
Oh, my
every.
personal favorite, an anecdote I heard from our potential third co-host, if he winds up on the pod, is him hearing from a Zionist Jew. What about the genocide of this guy meant to say Yazidis, but he didn't know the term Yazidi, so he said Yahtzees.
Yeah, or like it's like I should not have to tell you that the Armenian genocide is bad for me to explain that you committing a genocide is also bad, right? This is I shouldn't have to go through a giant checklist. But actually, I know we hadn't initially planned on talking about this, but I'm reading this IHRA list, and it's fascinating. Because some of this you can sort of see where they're coming, right? For example, making mendacious, not a word you hear often, but okay, mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy, or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions. And it's interesting because they say that, but they don't clarify how they actually use this. The actual way they use this is, for example, if we were to point out, as we did earlier, that you have NGOs that are funded by Israeli Jews and staffed by Israeli Jews, arguing for certain policy, they would say that's anti-Semitic, just pointing out that there's an obvious national self-interest there. No other nation gets this treatment, right? If there was a Russian-backed NGO that was staffed by Russians and exclusively dedicated itself to attacking Ukrainian institutions, it would not be considered Russophobia to point out that the Russians involved in this organization and the Russians funding this organization might be interested in Russian interests, right? And obviously, if the reverse were true with Ukrainians, nobody treats these as bigoted. It's just sort of common sense. In the United States, we hear a lot about Chinese students, for example, and it's just sort of accepted in American conservative discourse that all Chinese students in America are secretly part of a global Chinese government plot to steal ideas from Americans, right? But they're the only country that does this, apparently. No other country on earth would act like that. Only the Chinese government has figured out that your students can get ideas from other places. Apparently, this is a revolutionary concept. It's part of Maoism, I suppose. The revolutionary Maoist conception of you can go somewhere and learn about that place. Um, if Israeli students were doing the same, it would be a horrible act of bigotry to make the same allegation. Um, it's very interesting, and these double standards that Israel benefits from, which even me saying that they benefit from double standards, the IHRA would probably consider a bigoted act,
Yep.
are part of the reason that Israel has been able to sort of acquire its unique, special, and like disproportionate influence in international affairs.
Yep. Oh, another, since we're on the IHRA topic, if you've got the list still up, there's one about um, like applying historical allegations against Jews to the state of Israel. The blood libel points to that definition of anti-Semitism, and this is another one that sort of gets to the heart of what tropes are in this context. We all hear so much about the anti-Semitic trope. It's like some 14th century pogromist said that Jews are bad. Well, you in the 21st century are saying that Israel's bad, so therefore you're infected by pogromist microparticles. That's the core of what this is. You see this with like blood libel inflation, like setting aside Ariel Toaf's work. The idea is like basically any bad behavior you accuse Israel of means that you are, through some unclear means, like reinstantiating medieval European anti-Semitism into the 21st century. There's like some sort of logic of contamination going on there that like you're bringing like some sort of sin out of the past into the present by basically making any criticism of Israel.
Well, and that's interesting because, yeah, when you really get into it, a lot of what the state of Israel and their backers consider anti-Semitic is just any kind of criticism ever. Yep. And going further, because that's a topic I think we're going to get into in a bit, I'll quickly say one more from this list. This is an incredible list. I can't believe I've never actually bothered to look up this whole list because this is wild stuff. This one's great. Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations, which is an insane thing to consider bigoted, because anybody with a brain knows that when a person is from two countries and is ethnically part of the population of one of those countries, they are likely to be biased in favor of that, right? If I have, again, to use an example of China, if I have a guy who's born in China, he is a Chinese American, right? And he is a diehard supporter of China in all aspects, right? And he is engaged in anti-Taiwan activism. I can say that's because he's Chinese and he supports China, and nobody, not even the Chinese guy, would be upset by that. He would agree with me. He would say, yes, I'm Chinese and I am an American and I want China to be stronger because I am Chinese. I am also an American, but I am Chinese. But with Israel, if I point out that a Jewish American or an Israeli American seems to be in favor of positions, politically speaking, that benefit the state of Israel, if I were to point out, and again, this is so common sense, it almost like blows my mind that they would even dare to put this on a list, because it just invalidates all the other stuff on the list on the face of it, right? Like, if an Israeli American is supporting Israel and I say it's because you're an Israeli, that is anti-Semitic. It is anti-Semitic to say that. If I say, if a Jewish American supports the Jewish state of Israel with the Jewish star on its flag, and I say it's because he's Jewish, that is anti-Semitic. That is an act of bigotry. That is an act of moral evil. To point that out, there is no other case in the world. There is no other situation where people talk like this. Seriously, right? I'm trying to think of examples. I don't want to keep using the example of the Chinese, but it's like, or the Russians, but it's hard to even think because it's so obvious. Any country. I remember during the election, I saw a very weird ad on Twitter, and it was by a super PAC or something named Armenians for Trump, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, spoiler alert, the Armenians for Trump were big fans of the country of Armenia. Am I supporting the Armenian genocide by pointing out that the Armenians for Trump might support Armenia? Am I now right there in the trenches with the Young Turks? No, it's just obvious. It's oh my goodness. This is a crazy list. I'm glad you mentioned this. I know we've sidetracked a bit on it, but this is really, if you ever want to understand why these people make the arguments they make, this is a great list to read, because my goodness, what are we like? Okay, another one on here is just being Christian, which is funny. Claims of Jews killing Jesus. That's just the Bible. Like, the Catholic Church is just inherently anti-Semitic in their eyes. Technically, all churches are in their eyes. The Mormons. Mitt Romney was an anti-Semite if he read the Gospels and agreed with them. Like, under the definition that Israel puts out, I guess I can understand how they think that or not Israel, but the IHRA. I guess I can understand how they think that a majority of the world is anti-Semitic and plotting on their downfall because
And
having
this definition is increasingly entering American civil rights law.
yes, and I think that's something that you could probably explain a little better than me. But this is like to be clear to people listening, real quick. This is how our government thinks about anti-Semitism, which is going to segue with the rest of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, you want to move on to the Batar bit because that's a perfect segue to that.
Yes, yes, the Batar thing. I'm so happy you sent me that. That article blew my mind. So please go ahead and describe that. That was one of the craziest things I think I've read all week.
So the youth organization of the Israeli political party, Likud, their youth organization called Batar, named after the ancient fortress. So their youth organization basically writes deportation lists for the U.S. Who is deported, who is not in the U.S. is to a significant extent decided by a quasi-political, quasi-street gang organization based in Israel.
Yes. And, you know, it's important if somebody's listening and somehow doesn't know this. First of all, Benjamin Netanyahu is part of the Likud party. This is the like dominant political party in Israeli politics. Their youth organization literally tells the American government who to deport. And it works. And the article goes through several examples where Batar activists are out in the streets chanting like we are with ICE, we are with ICE. If you're an American conservative and you think the deportations are for you, no, they're not. Right? Do Turning Point USA chapters get the right to list individuals and send that to the government for deportation? No. But Likud's youth organization, a foreign political party, and you know, I did a little reading on Batar. And so I'll just quickly say, and then we can get back to this. But Batar groups also include a lot of Kahanists, right?
Yep.
And Kahanists.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The organization is fundamentally a Jabotinskyist one, but Kahana is sort of. So it's funny. These are traditionally considered two rival movements of the far right in Israel. However, given the fact that like no one's pretending to do liberal Zionism anymore, and the ones who were have all moved to New York City, the center of Israeli politics nowadays is more or less the Jabotinskyists and the ethno-nationalist right. Their standard conservatives now are the Kahanists.
Yes. And this is relevant because what that means, and again, I'm gonna get into some grisly material here. But Kahanists include Baruch Goldstein, who
Yes.
conducted the Cave of the Patriarchs mass shooting, where he killed 29 Muslims and wounded another 150s in a massacre, right? And you know, these Kahanists move freely within Batar. You know, Batar does not stop Kahanists. Batar has connections to Kahanists. Imagine if Turning Point USA had a sizable minority of people who supported Dylan Roof and thought that Dylan Roof was a hero. Can you imagine? Can you conceive of a politics for any other group where you could say that a mass shooter did good, murdering civilians, and a vocal minority, in the very least, of your organization, which is working directly with the American government, would agree that this ethnic-based mass shooting was a good thing? It's inconceivable.
Yes. Israel's Minister for National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he is from an independent Kahanist political party called
Hello? Sorry, I think you cut out for a second for me.
Wall, a photograph of Mr. Goldstein.
Yes. Okay. So I think you cut out a little bit for me, But just in case the recording didn't pick it up, the Israeli Minister of, is it National Security?
National security, yeah.
Yeah, had a portrait of a mass shooter in his office. Like, again, imagine if Tulsi Gabbard had a picture of or not Tulsi Gabbard. Well, maybe. Tulsi Gabbard, or anybody else in Trump's cabinet had a portrait of
Bondi would be
Daniel.
the equivalent.
You said Bondi? Okay, so
Yeah, Bondi would be his equivalent here.
imagine if Pam Bondi had a portrait of Dylan Roof in her office, and the rest of the world just weren't supposed to draw any conclusions from that. It was just like, well,
Yeah,
who knows?
Itamar Ben Gvir's presence in that role, I'd say that alone justifies October 7th.
Oh, I mean, it's insane. Like, if I really cannot. There is no comparable state to Israel, and there is no comparable political movement worldwide to Zionism. There just isn't, right? Um, there's no comparison. You can be put in a critical position that determines, state policy and
State policy
open.
in the West Bank as a security minister.
Yes, yes. Like, it's I can't even. There is no equivalent in America. There's truly no equivalent. Like, I cannot think of a scenario talking about, again, American racial politics,
Yeah,
right?
it's like if
Where
Pam
you
Bondi was in charge of like not just Homeland Security, but like specifically like black neighborhood policing, while
yes, yes.
having the portrait of Dylan Roof on her wall.
Exactly, exactly. If the person in charge of sending cops to the hood was also a person who thought it was cool that somebody murdered a bunch of black people, and then, if you were to point out, wait a minute, this seems like they might have a bit of an ulterior motive here, you were called a monster. People were like, "What are you? How dare you even imply that factors into this?" Like, what? But anyhow, I guess to get back to Batar, right? Yeah. So, to be clear, to right wing people who are listening that think that deportation policy is being decided by and for the interests of Americans, or, as you often see on Twitter, white Americans, no, absolutely not. You do not have the power to order deportation by name of specific people that Batar does. You just don't. You factually do not. And Batar is an explicit Israeli Jewish, like, for lack of a better word, like, nationalist organization, right? The American government does not ask Patriot Front to write up a list of people to be deported. This does not happen. And if they were to even attempt something like that, it would be the greatest political scandal in the history of political scandals. No, the only group, and for the record, if Joe Biden were still the president, and like I can't even think of an example. If Antifa, whatever, if Antifa were to write up a list of people that the government should investigate, do you think Joe Biden would go, "Hey, Antifa gave me this list of people. I know Antifa's decentralized, right? But
Yeah,
whatever."
the closest example here is like also a Zionist one. It's ADL FBI cooperation. That's the only like example you can find under previous Democratic Party administrations.
Yes,
It is
yes.
also a Zionist example.
Exactly, exactly. And again, it would be anti-Semitic for you and I to point out that it certainly seems like Zionist organizations have sway, regardless of who's in power in this country, to demand people be attacked politically or be, in the case of Qatar, literally deported. Literally deported. Um,
Yes, and for anyone still thinking that, oh wow, wow, these Zionist Jews, they want to do mass deportations for me, even if it's like fundamentally for their interests, I'm going to benefit from this, right? No, on their Twitter, in any time a journalist puts a microphone in front of one of their faces, they will brag about their role in, like their mother party, Likud's role in driving uh, Arab minorities out of Israel proper or out of areas they occupy into the West. Uh, like this is something they're quite proud of. Like I was sending Anonsus before we started recording, just like a couple tweets of theirs where they're cheering for, in this case, fictional examples of Palestinians being sent to Europe and framing it as punishment for Europeans not being sufficiently obedient Goy slaves.
Yes, yes. And it's like, in particular, I'll read one of these tweets. So one of the ones you sent me, it was Qatar Worldwide celebrating Gazans arriving in Belgium, right? And they were bragging about this. And this was despite the fact that anybody who knows anything about the country of Belgium would be like, man, I don't really feel like the Belgian people need a lot of refugees from the Middle East. Like, how does this benefit Belgium? And it doesn't, of course. But it does benefit Israel, and it does benefit Batar. So yeah, the Batar, which is the same group that, again, a lot of these, like you said, you put it very eloquently, a lot of these sort of American nationalists, right-wing individuals, etc., they will say, listen, I know that these people are being deported for anti-Semitism, which I don't think is a reason somebody should be deported, but at least they're being deported, right? But the reality is they are only being deported because of quote-unquote anti-Semitism. There would be zero reason. In fact, a lot of the people that Batar is ordering to be deported are legal students, right? They're not violent criminals. They're not rapists and murderers. They are.
In some cases, they are Europeans in America.
Yes, in some cases, they're Europeans. It's not a race thing. They are not American citizens, and they speak out against the state of Israel. And so for that reason, they are kicked out of the country. That is the only reason they are kicked out of this country. If you think that the deportation of a Chinese college student, because that Chinese college student went to an anti-Zionist protest, is somehow changing demographics in America, you are a moron. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that Chinese student will be replaced by 100 more who are of firmer loyalty to Israel. Like, once you have this filtration process, like, there's this whole, like, I'm going to make a deal with the Jews where they're going to kick out the anti-Semites so we get our demographics back on track. No, once this filter is in place, this removes any sort of reluctance these Zionists are going to have that migrants could be anti-Semitic towards them.
Yes, exactly. It actually encourages taking on, this is something I've heard as well, and this is an argument that I've tried to explain. Some people don't seem to grasp this, but I think it makes a lot of sense. It actually encourages you in a way to take in more foreign students because it sets the precedent that if these foreign students cause trouble, they can be kicked out, right? And you can't do the same with American students, right? If an American student attends an anti-Israel protest, they can't be sent back to their home country. Their home country is America, right? If Israel conducts itself as it always does, as a belligerent, violent power in the Middle East, and it murders civilians, right? The foreign students are the only people that can be kicked out of the country for being mad at this. So it actually encourages you to bring in more foreign students because these are students. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just saying exactly.
Yes, because not only are foreign students paying more than American students, but also if they cause trouble, you now have a way to fast track kick them out. And all it takes is a member of the Jewish political party in Israel, Likud, writing this student's name on a list. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to get kicked out. And again, these are not people that are taking jobs. These are not people that are settling here long term, right? Foreign students are arguably the last group you should be interested in deporting. By all means, there's a discussion to be had about the way that foreign students can take positions at universities from American students, right? And that's a fair discussion to be had. But nobody is trying to limit the amount of foreign students. In fact, Donald Trump is actually trying to bring in more foreign students, specifically from places like China and India, right?
Yes.
So the political conversation is not what some of these right-wing people will tell you, which is a debate between whether there should or should not be foreign students. The question is whether these foreign students should have the right to be occasionally critical of Israel. That is the
Exactly.
only thing that is in contention at the moment. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was just agreeing with all of these points. Like, uh, the Tour are not American nationalists. They're not going to accidentally become American nationalists without realizing it. They're not going to become pro-white unintentionally. They're not going to become cynically pro-white and form an alliance with you against the Browns. Like, this is, I mean, also something more fundamental to Zionism. It's a nationalism in quotation marks, which depends to an unusual extent upon negating other nationalisms, uh,
Mm-hmm.
breaking down the existence of a Palestinian people, and in an interesting way, which may strike some of the audience as familiar, denying that there ever was such a thing as a Palestinian. Um, and it's not just Palestinians, it's later on Syrians get this treatment, Egyptians get this treatment, Lebanese get this treatment, and the countries to which they wish to deport these Arabs get this treatment as well, especially by the more liberal Zionists.
Mm-hmm. And that's the classic strategy that's used, right? Is first you deny the legitimacy of the peoples that surround you, and then when you kick these people out and you send them to other places that are often either in Western Europe or America, you say those countries also aren't a people. And so they, unlike us, they should be willing to accept these refugees. In fact, it's their duty to accept these refugees because we, the state of Israel, are the only state in the world that is founded on a specific race and culture, right? Every other state, at least every other state that's willing to take our refugees, is not. All of these states are founded on principles, on values, on political conceptions, right? Only our state is defined by blood. And the result is, what do you know? Again and again, as we mentioned at the beginning, with Libya, with Syria, with what's going on right now with Gaza, they kick out people who are native to that land. They send them to other countries, and then they tell the people in those other countries that they are evil people if they don't accept them. They do not tell themselves, they don't go, we, the Israelis, are evil for kicking these people out. No, that's a moral good. But then every other country would be evil if they kick these people out. And it's sort of a genius and obvious mechanism because what it creates is this kind of loop where they can keep kicking out the people they don't want and sending them to other countries. And if those other countries don't take those people, those other countries get framed as the villain, as the immoral, evil actor, not them. They are not the villain in this scenario. They will say, "Oh, we this is purely for defense, right? These people want to leave. You know, these people want to be locked out of their houses and bombed and shot because they don't want to submit to us. And if you don't submit to our desire to habitate, I get what's the word? Like if you don't submit to our plan to
Resettle.
resettle. Yes, that's a much better. I was about to invent a new word there. That's much better than me trying to invent.
Rehabitate does kind of work.
Exactly. It's like if you don't submit to our plan to resettle these people in your country, you're the bigot. And suddenly the debate shifts. It shifts away from the immorality of Israel and it shifts towards the immorality of every country that does not do exactly what Israel wants it to.
Yeah, and there's sort of two slices of bread to this kosher sandwich where um, there is absolutely a way you can do prejudice against migrants without actually affecting the demographics of the country in which you're doing it. Like, Tommy Robinson politics don't actually have anything to do with demographics per se. Uh, and I'm not just specifically looking at Tommy Robinson here. I'm looking at a general sort of right populism, which does sometimes racism and sometimes religious sectarianism against the religion of Islam. Like, that is a kind of politics which can exist in a stable way, with, and well, it will only exist in a stable way so long as there is a minority against which you're bouncing off.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think kind of a thread that we can connect between Tommy Robinson and this kind of kosher sandwich Israeli policy is the case of Dr. Rama, I believe is how you say the name, in England.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depends on how Arab you want to get with it. You could say something like Rahmeh or whatever. Like, well, I can't do the set of like the. Wait, is it the hard H or well? It doesn't matter. I'm going to say Rama or
Man,
Rama.
is that more or less
It's
bigoted if I
not.
say
It's
it?
not the truly gutter. It's not the truly guttural. That's how an Israeli would say it. But
Oh, oops! Don't want to
I
sound like
don't
one of
know
them.
enough. I don't know enough Arabic to know whether it's just a plain old H or whether it's a slightly harsh sound. But anyway, how we pronounce her name isn't uh, a critical issue. Is like who she is and what she's experiencing.
Yes, and so to put it briefly, and I think this is a topic. We've already floated, we've already swam in similar waters tonight, so we'll kind of move into it. Um, Dr. Rama is a Palestinian woman in England who is engaged in anti-Zionist politics, right? And is she has recently come under a lot of fire from the British government. And this is because of the fact that, unlike other anti Zionist activists, she has talked with people in the far right. She has talked with British nationalists. And she has argued the case that British nationalists and Palestinian and anti Zionists actually have kind of common issues, right? And that there should be some kind of a coalition here. And because of this, I would argue she has faced unique levels of persecution. Because this is the same England, and I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, but this is the same sort or sorry, this is a prime example of how this like mechanism works. Because there really isn't a lot. The Israelis take a much stronger issue with anti-Zionist activism from the right than from the left. And the only reason that they aren't engaging the right in similar levels of political persecution as the left at the moment is because so much of the right is unwilling to become explicitly anti-Zionist. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, and therefore unwilling to become effective.
Exactly, and that's really the crux of the issue. Is it's like, as I think we've detailed throughout this, right? Zionists are the main cause of mass migration in Europe. They are the main supporters of this worldwide. Their actions are the direct fuel to this fire that ends up with millions of Arabs entering Western Europe, with to a lesser extent, but still it occurs. Same immigration in America, right? This is because of the action of Zionists. And one of the things, as you mentioned, but like Tommy Robinson, that the Zionists desperately want to do is they want to, in this very culture subverting way, create this divide, right? Where if you're opposed to mass migration, you can side with them against mass migration. They want to make you think that, well, many of these migrants are anti Semitic. After all, why wouldn't they be? They are being kicked out of their houses by the Semites involved in the word anti Semite, right? It is the direct
Yep.
consequence of that government that they are now in other countries. So they might have a bit of a predisposition to not like said countries, or said country, Israel, for, bombing their home, for funding their civil war. And they want to tell you, listen, if you work with us against these people, you can get what you want. It can contribute. It can benefit your right-wing nationalist cause, but it can't. It is functionally impossible that it will, because they are the ones sending them there. It is a losing argument. When you are pro-Zionist and anti-mass immigration from the Middle East, you are holding a fundamentally self-contradictory position. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the same is true in reverse. It's like two things which have to go together. Each side of a alleged left-right spectrum only gets one of them while opposing the other.
Yep. Because then on the other hand, you have left-wing activists that will say they are anti-Zionist openly, but at the same time, they will also say that they are pro, immigration from these regions, right? And it's like the only reason these people are immigrating here, in the numbers they're immigrating here, are the Zionists. Like you are supporting the consequences of Zionist actions, but not the actions that cause these consequences. It's totally bizarre, and it leads to this kind of, because Dr. Rama, I think she's a great follow on Twitter. And Dr. Rama is really like the perfect example of this, because she has criticism from the right. Oh, that's awesome. I don't think she's followed me back, man. I wish she would. But she's a prime example, because from the left, the criticism of her is, how dare you work with the far right? How dare you associate with nationalists? And she really took a lot of criticism because she said, she said that anti-Zionism is fundamentally linked with Judaism, right? With the Jewish state of Israel. And she faced an unreal level of backlash from the left. And then from the right, they say, you're a Palestinian, right? You're an enemy because of this. But she has said, and she has made her statement known, she's like, by all means, if you want to deport me and you're right wing, deport me to Gaza. And they can't do that, because the last thing that Israel wants is more Palestinians in Gaza. Pretty clearly. You don't commit a genocide against a population because you want more of that population. So what has happened is the right-wing pro-Zionists, or in my mind, even more infuriatingly, the people that claim that these are unrelated issues and they don't care, they're both sides guys, right? They don't like her. And then on the left, the leftist anti-Zionists don't like her because they don't like her acknowledging the fundamental reality, which is that the Palestinian struggle against the Israeli state is a nationalist struggle, right? It is a struggle for the Palestinian people. It is not a struggle of political ideology, because Zionism is fundamentally Jewish supremacism. That is the ideology in practice. It is Jewish supremacism and Jewish expansionism. It is the idea that a particular race and religion deserves a territory and deserves to expand that territory by killing or deporting everybody who is not part of that group, right? That is what it is. Yep. And if you are opposed to that, by definition, you're a nationalist. And that is something that...
And an anti-Semite, as we learned from Ayat
Yes. And you're an anti-Semite, because to oppose Israel expanding its borders is to engage in anti-Semitism. And so it's really at the crux of this whole thing, right? If you support Beitar and their deportation orders because you think that these foreign students are harming your nation, right? And harming your racial demographics, your people, whatever, right? If you oppose Dr. Rama because you say she's a Palestinian, she's not really British, right? Regardless, you are engaging in like pointless nonsense because you are attacking the symptom of the disease and not the disease itself, which is Zionism and the people of Israel, right? And the state of Israel. That is fundamentally the nucleus that all of this comes from. And if you think that the state of Israel and its international supporter-based diaspora, which includes Beitar in the United States, which, keep in mind, is the youth movement for a political party in Israel, right?
In the Israeli government.
In the Israeli government.
Israeli government, which provides the prime minister.
Like, again, I hate to use like the same analogies, but like, if there was a Chinese Communist Party youth movement in the United States that was physically going out in the streets and pointing at Taiwanese people and saying they should be deported, right? That would be, we would all know what the cause is, and that's the fact that they're Chinese nationalists. And if you align with those Chinese nationalists, and you somehow also think that by aligning with those Chinese nationalists, you are opposing China, you are an idiot. You are not. You are refusing to face reality because you don't want to admit the fact that those leftists are correct that Zionism is bad. And if you're a leftist and you say, well, Zionism is evil, but I don't want to work with nationalists on this issue, then not only are you attacking the very root of the Palestinian people's ideology, which is nationalism, but you are also refusing to acknowledge the root of Zion. Like, there is no anti-Zionist party in Israel. There is no scenario where the state of Israel is not Zionist. Sorry, I've been rambling, so go ahead.
No, but yeah, I just sent you a Muhammad El-Kurd article tying together a few of the points you were making. As Palestinians, we are told the semantic violence we practice with our words dwarfs the decades of systemic and material violence enacted against us by the self-proclaimed Jewish state. A drone is one thing, but a trope is unacceptable. And the title of the article is Jewish Settlers Stole My House. It's not my fault they're Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's just objectively true, right? You know, the symbol of Judaism is on the flag of Israel. Like, it's unreal.
And they use and they use it on areas they ethnically cleanse within the Gaza Strip. They use it like I don't know, like football players planting their flag at the opposite midfield. Like, no, wait a sec. Not just areas they ethnically cleanse, but even like they use it as a brand, as a form of torture upon Palestinians.
They do. I hadn't heard that. That they actually brand Palestinians with the Israeli flag, with the Jewish star.
Yeah, well, specifically with Star of David. Yeah.
Oh, see, that doesn't surprise me because one of the things that I've seen, I saw a video recently. It was really, really sad. Was you had a group of Israeli soldiers basically forcing a Palestinian at gunpoint to say, like, long live Israel, like Israel is the best, right? It's Israel and Judaism are inseparable, right? Israel and the Jewish people are inseparable, right? That is the foundation of the nation, the root of all of this. And so when you refuse to address, as both people on the right, they will say that they oppose, Israel the nation or the international Jewish diaspora or whatever, but they will support these Israeli organizations because they think it helps them achieve political goals. That is not a good idea. And people on the left will oppose Zionism, but they will refuse to address the fact that Zionism is not some kind of multicultural evil ideology, but is a very particular brand of ethnicity-based politics, right? None of them get it. And the results are tragic. The results are exactly what we're seeing again and again and again. And also the results politically are failures, mostly. Just absolute failures to accomplish anything,
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to get your based white power states by becoming the junior partner to a nationalism which has always been opposed to yours principally, and you're not going to get your universalistic humanist left wing whatever by basically facilitating ethnic cleansing projects or by being scared that the ethnic cleansers are going to say that you're being mean to my group.
Exactly. I think you summed it up well there. So I don't know if you had any other points you wanted to hit on.
No, I think we covered the ideas we were getting at for this pilot.
All right. Well, perfect. I think so too. I think we've articulated all of this. Hopefully, I haven't rambled too much, but it's sort of an inevitability. When you let me talk.
Yeah, creating a pod depends upon your ability to yap. That's an asset here.
But anyhow, I think that'll be it for episode 1, potentially the pilot of the Intifada Globalists. I'm, again, Agnonsis. You can find me on Twitter at Agnonsis, which is AGNONSIS. I post about a variety of topics. I post about right-wing politics. I post about anti-Zionism. I post about music I think is cool. All sorts of things. And I write Substack articles about extremist cults and other things that sort of tickle my fancy, which is my Substack's also at AGNONSIS, Agnonsis. And Doug, go ahead and say your Twitter name because I've already forgotten what your technical Twitter name is.
So you can find me at Doug Harrington6. No symbols, just letters and the number 6. That's Harrington spelled Harr. And I principally post about anti-Zionism.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Intifada Globalists, and have a good one, I guess.